Welcome everyone to another episode of LunarCRUSH Live. We're gonna have a fun episode today. We've got the Rick Schmitz, CEO of LTO Network. We got Sphereon here, a bunch of special guests. They got all together. It's almost like it'll be like, I did one live with like Nimic a while ago, but it'll be fun to have like a bunch of folks in here. So this will be really good. John's going to go through some metrics here first. And just a reminder, everyone, we do not take payment for our live streams. We bring in cool projects and people working on hard problems in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. And so we want to bring those stories and those people to light for you. Make sure you slam that subscribe button, as all the YouTubers like to say. Slam that thing. We got a bunch of fun streams coming up that we're going to be announcing here soon. Ask some questions in the chat here, like really super hard questions that these guys are going to all get twisted up and look at each other to see who answers them. That's the type of stuff we like. Just kidding. Ask whatever you want. Ask fun stuff. If we like it, we'll get them on there. And John, what's up with LTO Network on LunarCRUSH?
A lot is up with LTO Network on LunarCRUSH. So super excited to talk about this one. So much activity in the enterprise space. So I have so many great questions for them. But before we get into it, let's talk through just what is the kind of activity that we're seeing on LTO Network. And so I'll start by talking about some of the social volume that we see. So the social volume looks at the mentions of LTO Network across social channels. So this is when, someone does a social post and it's about LTO Network and they're mentioning the ticker, a hashtag, could just say LTO Network. And we're looking at that. What I'm showing you right here is the 1 year social activity, where it's up 318% over the previous time period. We see that the highest point that we've seen was 1,726 social mentions in a day. And we've seen that really accelerate from, if we look like towards Q3, Q4 last year, we moved from double digits. So really great growth, exciting, great job by their team. We're seeing social engagement go up 176% over the last year. What that's looking at is when someone does a social post about LTO Network, how much of a conversation is there beneath it? So we're looking at things like comments, we're looking at things like retweets, we're looking at on Reddit, we're looking at upvotes, and all of that engagement and activity. And so we see that that's moving up substantially as well, almost, dare I say, along the same trajectory as the price of LTO. And so very, very close similarities there on certain times and certain days. Another really important metric to look at is social contributors. So great if, say one individual is doing a lot of posts, but even better if a lot of individuals are doing a substantial amount of posts. And so we're seeing that go up as well. So over the last year, up 172%. I'll just take this day last year. There were 7 people one year ago, and now there is 225. And wow. We've seen as high as 2,071. In fact, this looks like a really active time period in here, like January, February time period. So a lot of engagement, a lot of contributors. Another thing to look at is, out of all of this, what percentage of the total pie out of all of crypto does LTO have? And so that's up 69.5%, which is actually really, really good. When we see that, we look at market caps a lot, like what's the market cap of the coin? What's it worth? Well, what's your social market share as well? And that's what we're looking at here. And we see that that's moved as high as, if I can get there, 0.33% of all social posts back on December 1st. And so pretty exciting stuff. Underneath that, let me just move this out of the way. We have a couple different metrics to look at. We've got a Galaxy score, which is just on the bottom side of being bullish at 60 out of 100. So that's looking at combined social and market activity just against LTO Network. So in other words, where is it now, relatively speaking, historically? And it's looking pretty good. We also look at AltRank, which is currently 249 out of the top 2142 coins in the market. And that's looking at the combined social and market activity of LTO relative to the entire market. So 249th coin there. And that's a real-time fluctuating metric as well. So don't be surprised if you see that moving around quite a bit as new data comes in. One last thing to look at is influencers. So as every single post comes in and it gets classified for sentiment, for spam, it gets classified by coin, by time period. When we see over the last year, the most influential social accounts, these are Twitter accounts, which are also looked at by how much engagement do their posts get. how many posts have those accounts made about LTO specifically, and how many followers do they have relatively speaking against each other. And so when we look at that, we've got the LTO network being in there, and we have kind of, I know the account switched, so it's kind of, you see it's 1 in 10. So if I made this on a shorter time period, you would just see the LTO network account. But we're seeing number 2 is Cees van Dam, Crypto Cees. We're seeing VIDT Datalink is number 3. Number 4 is Elite Turk. Number 5 is Jarzambek. Number 6 is Joshua Roomsberg. Number 7 is WSB Crypto or WSB Researcher. Vegeta Crypto, Crypto Differ. And with that, it's exciting. Let's bring our guests in.
Cool. Thanks, John. All right. Hello, team.
Hi there.
Hi, guys.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, guys.
Cool. Well, the way we like to start this is, and this is nice, you only one of you have to say where in the world you are, but where in the world are you? And maybe you guys can kind of do a little intro. Tell us all like your names and what are your roles in companies and everything.
Yeah, let me kick off, man. We're in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Great place to be right now. Yeah, my name is Rick Schmitz, CEO of LTO Network. And next to me, exciting to be here on the show, is Arnold Daniels. Go ahead, man.
Hi, I'm Arnold. I'm the lead architect of LTO Network. So yeah, great for having us.
Yeah, of course.
I'm Niels Klomp, the CTO of Sphereon, and Sphereon is a integrator with LTO Network.
Yeah, and my name is Maarten Boender, and I'm the co-founder together with Niels and Sebastian of Sphereon. And yeah, excited to be here. I take care a little bit more of the business side of things. So happy to talk about use cases and the business aspects of the things we're doing together.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here, and thank you for being a part of this. We could start in so many ways, but maybe Rick, you can kind of give us a little bit of a just what's kind of the short elevator pitch, like what is LTO Network, like what's the market, maybe a little bit of the background about how you guys got started and a little of the journey.
Yeah, sure. So we started off as a project winning a hackathon in the Netherlands, and we won it for the Ministry of Justice. Basically having multiple stakeholders involved, transferring data together and making sure this data was separate and immutable at the same time. And by winning this hackathon, we thought, okay, let's spin this into a project. And that's basically when LTO Network started, because we are seeing more enterprises and governments facing the same problem. They want to work together, they want to have the efficiency, but they were not able to work into one centralized system. So that's the reason why we started LTO Network, but it has evolved since. We are now implementing digital DIDs and verifiable credentials, which is even more exciting than the anchoring and the data separation we started with. But yeah, that's the sweet spot we're in. We're focusing mainly on multinationals and governments, as those are bringing in a lot of transactions to our network. So yeah, that's in short who we are. Maybe Arnold can take it from the tech side.
Sure, yeah. So we started out really with decentralizing workflows. As Rick already said, every company tries to automate their own workflow, but that's really siloed. As soon as you want to interact with another company, you go back to sending email, things like that, typing over data. So LTO Network started out as a solution for this, where companies aren't obligated to run on the centralized environment and a centralized workflow engine, but they can each run their own engine and implement their own piece of automation, and then connect those things together and communicate together. But in that space, you always have to deal with identities, as well as credentials. So who are you? Are allowed to do this? And I think the new path we're on is really interesting, because these credentials also take it out of just like the B2B space and also take it to the end users and take it to the consumers. allowing them to own and to control their own information, their own credentials.
And can you explain a little bit about how that works? So it's like two enterprise companies that are potentially sharing very important data, right? And those, you're saying they want it to be more decentralized, and so they're sharing that data with you guys. But then that data, since the network is decentralized, naturally is kind of creating the decentralized nature of that data, versus like someone saying, oh, there's this kind of like almost like an escrow account of data with one other centralized party. So you guys are kind of spreading that out. Is that how that's working?
Well, it's important to state that they're not sharing any data with us. We're just providing the network and providing the software. So the data is shared peer-to-peer, so they share it among themselves.
Gotcha.
But normally you would need some kind of arbiter there, because if two parties are supposed to have the same data and the same information, but one of the copies is different, then it's difficult to say which is the right copy, like who of these parties are manipulating the data and are cheating. So you could do that through a central party that says, okay, we control the truth, and you send it through us. And if there's some kind of conflict, well, you can come to us and we can say who's right or wrong. But with the use of blockchain, we can take away that central party and say, okay, you can just arrange it among themselves. And when there's a conflict, we can use the blockchain to actually see what happened and who here is the cheat and who is doing the right thing.
Very cool. And then how does kind of the Sphereon team kind of interface with that? And maybe you guys can talk a little bit about a use case or two to kind of let people wrap their head around how some of this stuff is working.
Yeah, sure. So maybe first start with a little bit of a technical explanation of the type of technology. So we're very much into verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers. And those really bring that trust on the internet, basically, which is currently really lacking. Decentralized identifiers, in short, are basically a unique identification, very much like a URL for a website or a web page, for instance. But attached to that is identity data, and not so much identity data that are attributes of myself, for instance, but very much identity data that you can prove data. So typically so-called public keys. And multiple public keys. And on the other hand, you have the verifiable credentials. And just to give you a really short example of what verifiable credential technology is about, I typically bring up basically a liquor store. If you go into a liquor store, well, in the Netherlands, you have to be over 18. Well, I guess the guys here on the bench, well, they don't ask for our IDs and credentials, but let's
come
say,
on.
Well, I was bold early, so yeah, just that. But typically, if you are roughly around 18, they will ask for your ID card, for instance. And actually, the person behind the counter only has to ask you this single question: are you over 18 or not? Am I allowed to sell it to you? And
right.
If I provide my ID card, there's way more information on there. That's my first name, last name. Typically, that's also where you have been born, the actual date of birth. And for instance, in the Netherlands, that's the social security number on there. And with verifiable credential technology, we're basically creating the same thing. So we have verifiable credentials that are issued and are signed by, for instance, governments or healthcare providers, or the Chamber of Commerce, for instance, or Firm 24, for instance, for which we are doing a project. And what happens then is basically they are the trusted parties, and whenever somebody wants to verify that information, they don't trust the person in front of them, they trust the issuing party. And you can use that for all kinds of use cases, but for that, I gladly hand it over to Maarten.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are here in Amsterdam, so I rather like the access to the coffee shops as an example of 18 plus than
coffee,
the booze.
Coffee.
Yeah, if you want to have a cup of coffee. Anyway, so that is one of the well-known use cases. Another one, which is pretty well known, is about educational credentials. The internationalization of education, people traveling around the world for work and education. Basically, they have to prove that they have a degree or a bachelor from a university, probably in another country somewhere that we probably don't know. And how do you prove that you really have got that degree or that skill set? So in order to prove that, you can make sure that another party issues the credential that basically guarantees that the information they provide is true by basically signing the transaction, the file with their private key. And then the person who wants to check, like the employer in another country or the university in another country, just has to verify that file by basically checking the signatures and seeing that it was issued by a trusted party, by a government institute or a university in another country that then provides the authenticity to the claim of having a certain educational degree. So that is, I think that's something that everybody can relate to. If we look a little bit closer to our work together with LTO, is for instance a project that we're working on right now, which is called My Company Wallet, which is basically taking verifiable credential technology and digital identity from the personal use cases to the enterprise use cases. If you have a company or you're starting a company, you have to register and provide your information not only to found the company, but then a zillion times to your telco company, your ISP, your bank, your car rental, your car lease company. All kinds of people want to know who you are and that you say who you are and that you're actually entitled to open a bank account or to basically sign a contract with your ISP to get a fast internet connection. And the way that we are envisioning that is that a company will hold a wallet, a digital wallet, where it's first of all registered who the owners are of the company, who are, and if a bigger company, who is basically entitled to sign, who is authorized to sign contracts, and with what kind of rules there might be. But then the next thing is to be able to provide like your Chamber of Commerce document or your banking information to all these people that want that information, that need that information to onboard you. So currently, we all know that is often done by email, but just sending in PDFs and again and again, and whole stacks of paper needs to be scanned and sent over to 100 parties that you need to onboard with. That is not only very much work and error-prone work for you as the owner of the company or as the person who wants to onboard the company, but also for the receiving end. Understand that your telco is getting all of these PDF documents with a copy of your passport, with a copy of your Chamber of Commerce registration, with your bank account information. And they have to type that all over. They have to input that, often still manually, into their systems before they can process your application. Now, if you do this through verifiable credentials, they basically get a data file. Just a data file with all the data labeled nicely into that, signed by your bank, signed by the Chamber of Commerce, signed by your public notary, that they can automatically verify, that they can automatically authenticate that it's actually true and signed by a trusted party. Fully automated, no people involved. And then because it's data, they can automatically import it, ingest it into their own back office systems and process it automatically. So for them, it's a tremendous saving of time and money. And they're basically taking processes which take weeks down to minutes because of the straight-through processing of this data. And that's the big carrot for these companies, why they would want to pay, why a bank or a telco or an ISP wants to pay for this kind of technology, is because it will save them a lot of money and bring them a strategic benefit of being able to process things faster than other parties. And that's where this technology will shine. And
so it's really, it's really interesting because you're talking about, you know, business process automation and things like OCR and you know, saving money and time and all of that. And that's a conversation that seems to have been around for quite a while, quite a long time. And now, but we're talking about now there's blockchain involved. And I'm curious, where are you bringing blockchain to these enterprises, or are these enterprises coming to you saying we need blockchain?
Well, it's early days in this whole technology, the verifiable credentials. Not even all of the specifications are 100% solid yet. But it's the light is shining in the minds of these people when they hear that we can take their automation process, where you have sometimes dozens of people sitting in the office just processing this data, basically do that fully automatic, straight through processing.
And also, I guess, this is really our background. Sphereon started out basically as a enterprise content services company, and before that, especially Maarten, we have more than 20 years of experience in enterprise content management and document management. And when we got into blockchain technology roughly 5 years ago, we definitely saw this opportunity, because this type of solutions and technology can bring back the trust, or can bring the trust basically to the digital form, and it can remove fraud, for instance. So it's not only a direct cost savings by optimizing straight through processing, but it would also remove a lot of the issues that can happen with, for instance, PDF documents being manipulated, diplomas not being real, and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I'm actually seeing a shift where not so long ago it was really organizations saying, okay, we have to do something with blockchain, and maybe we can find a solution that's kind of useful or not. And the shift is really that companies don't longer care if blockchain is involved. They just want a good solution that saves them time, saves them money, and they can trust upon. And if blockchain can help in that, great. If it's done another way, also great. But we really see that there are certain solutions where blockchain actually is the right answer to the question.
It's really interesting, like this, that Martin, like the story you kind of told, and to kind of connect a couple of those things. It's like, you know, you're giving more information to people than you probably would like. You know, like you're saying, verifying your license. Like there's only one small piece of data on that credential that actually needs to be shared, and maybe there's another small piece of data on that credential, but that needs to be shared with the entirely other party that needs to verify it. But then it's like you said, you know, there's dozens of people in these offices where these data dumps are going and inputting it. And then again, like to tie that into hiring, it's like, well, even hiring and knowing that those dozens of people actually say who they were, or did the work that they said they did, and they were, you know, the actual person doing the work, not just like the person looking over that person's shoulder or the person walking in the background. Like you actually did some of the work, and it just shows how many holes there are in that kind of data process lifecycle, that you could mismanage data, and you could, all of your PII, which, you know, and it's funny how it's like the trustlessness thing is the only part that is really needed for the actual trust. And so it's like you're tying a bunch of pieces here together. It's really impressive.
Yeah, so there's also use cases around healthcare. We have a number of hospitals who are customers, and they're looking at this technology for different purposes as well. First of all, for the HR department, where they basically onboard new employees, where they are collecting documents, and those are also often contain a lot of personal information at the HR department. You want to make sure that that is secure and not being shared. But also from the patients themselves, they want to have, they need to share their data, but they don't want to share it with everybody. There was a kind of a scandal a year and a half ago here in Holland, where there was a starlet from a reality TV show that had admitted suddenly to hospital, and it turned out that over 150 other people who had nothing to do with the case were just looking into the central system just to see what was going on. And Of course,
Wow.
that was found out.
Mm.
And that's really, I think, the most private information you have. And by basically the verifiable credentials, if you hold that as a person yourself in your digital wallet, only you control it, and only you decide what information you share and with whom you want to share it. If the person who needs it asks for the information, you can decide, okay, I want to share everything, or I only want to share parts of it. And that makes it the other thing, which is very powerful for everybody who is basically doesn't want to share all of his data to everybody.
Yeah, and I think the scandals are plentiful, because just a few months ago we had something to do with a COVID registration, so with vaccines and with tests, where all the data, so all the private data of everybody that ever done a test here in the Netherlands was shared with call centers. They needed to have only a little information to do their job, but everything was shared, and basically everybody could just copy it and take look if your neighbor had the test, what the result was, take the dump, sell it, etc. So you really see that the need of this, where we are really more concerned with privacy, is really necessary at the moment.
Yeah, and then from us as companies, we love to have use cases for business to consumer, because it involves lots and lots of customers. But also the most money you often make in the enterprise space. And the nice thing for enterprises is that this verifiable credential technology basically provides a very secure and privacy preserving data exchange method. To exchange data that you can automatically verify, that you can automatically trust and automatically ingest and process.
Yeah, maybe good to say is that most of these companies don't actually want to hold this data.
Yeah, true.
So like a payment processor or a bank or an insurance company sees the KYC and AML procedure as a burden. It costs them a lot of money.
True.
Opening a bank account in the Netherlands takes at a big bank takes about 6 months right now as a company. So that's extremely long. And why? Because they have this burden of KYC and AML. And if you can shift that burden somehow to a verifiable credential, which lies with a public notary or with the Chamber of Commerce, where this credential is verified, that a person representing a company is actually able to represent that company to open a bank account as well, then this whole process of onboarding shifts down from months to a matter of seconds. And I think the benefits is not only for the banks, it's also for the user experience, because everybody wants the best user experience. Everybody is onboarding their products online. And if you're buying your products online, you need to do KYC if you're selling business services. So every business service provider in the world is in need of this faster way of doing KYC, AML, and authorization checks. And this manual process can be digitized so that it's a matter of seconds to verify somebody if he's able to legally represent the company. And I think that is the big moonshot are we all aiming for, that we just implemented in LTO Network, and what Sphereon is implementing, so that we can basically make a bridge between the blockchain industry, where we have this great new technology, and the implementation which these guys have in the real world. So that's basically what we are doing here, man.
So it seems like there's so many possible use cases, especially on the enterprise side. How are you seeing them organize themselves? Are you dealing with the C-suite? Are you dealing with like business analysts? Or is this the engineers? Who exactly is coming to you, and who are you working with at these larger companies?
Yeah, again, it's new technology, so it's not in the boardroom yet. Blockchain, I think, just arrived a bit in the boardroom, and they're over the shock of combining blockchain with crypto. So I think that they're growing, but I think we're now in the line of business managers space. So not the technologists anymore, not the innovators anymore, but the people who lead an onboarding department and financial department and things like that, and say, okay, this is technology I can use to do my job better and get better results, save costs.
Yeah, this is actually funny. We started as an integrator of our own product back in 2017. And we got such a massive headache of telling first the developers non-familiar with blockchain how it works, and like starting with Bitcoin until the thing we did, with LTO Network. And then like we never heard of anything anymore from them, like most of the times. And then you move to the second stage, if you could pass that development team to the innovators. And then they would just throw random budgets to blockchain things where you think like, guys, do we really want to do this? You don't need blockchain for this. Why do you need, let's say, a track and trace system on something that's totally irrelevant, but they just want to throw money at something they got as a budget. But that's also gone now. The budget, it was taken by us, obviously, but
Arnold's big smile there.
Development of our network, but we actually said, okay, let's stop doing this and let's give this work to integrators like Sphereon, which can make much more impact. They have the business contacts and they know exactly how to get to the business people, and making sure that something not only stays within the innovation room of a company, but actually gets outside of that, where massive big transactions coming in, where you're actually part of the whole IT system and their day-to-day business. I think that's where our main focus on is, like, how do we get into production systems and not per se in the innovation space of a company.
It's really, really interesting. Probably this is a topic for a conference or something, because it seems like the other big impact here is that there's now these partnerships, these things that kind of fall outside the walls of the company across many companies. It's almost like there's new departments that need to be formed within large enterprises to deal with this, because this is beyond them to a degree.
Yeah, you start talking more about ecosystems where companies are interconnected and use like a chain where they exchange that data and share that data.
It's kind of similar to like
blockchain space. That's the beauty of the blockchain, right? Yeah, I think so too.
No, just real quick, I was going to say it's kind of similar to something like what Plaid did, here in the U.S., where all of the banks had a kind of third-party login service, so you could put in your credentials for each of those specific banks, and they would do the credentialing for you. But the misstep there is, you still have to put in your login and your password into this thing, right? And then they would go kind of offload. And I think the banks love that. Like you were saying, Rick, like a huge piece of this, like, I don't know if this is already in your guys' decks, but it's like, this hack happened, this hack happened, this hack, like this is all like PR based stuff. And it's kind of like, want to stay out of the news for negative things, want to stop spending this amount of money on all of the security that you're doing individually. Like if you're, Ford, or some other company, you're not specializing in compliance and security around like your data, you're building cars, right? So it's finding some other way to do that. It's almost like, kind of where like a browser extension or something comes in, where it's like, hey, I'm now could be verified across all of these networks. And it's a huge, like, that's where I see, I think the huge like selling opportunity really is like PR impact of some of these things and time saving there.
Yeah, and I think it's important that, like, you don't want to have all these digital identity and verifiable credentials living on one chain. It should be cross-chain, otherwise it won't work. Because like one company would use Ethereum, the other one uses Waves or a Polkadot fork or whatever, or LTO. But you need to have those be able to interchangeable, and making sure that you could verify it on any chain that's there. And that's what we're launching in 3 weeks from now, hopefully, right?
two weeks, right? 2.
Tell us more.
Other question about the so if you register yourself at a web shop because you want to buy something, you provide them your address, you provide them your bank or your credit card information, and why? Do they need your address? No, the shipper does. Do they need your banking information? No, the only thing they do is pass it off to a payment processor. So the only thing that they need to know is that they have like a unique identifier who you are, or that you are this person. And then when they start shipping something, they just pass that unique identifier to the shipper, who then can query for the address and the time and the place that you want it delivered. And then the same for the payment processor. They just pass on your link basically to the payment processor, who then queries for your bank account information or your credit card information and processes the payment. And so they don't need to have all this information. And they rather don't have, because the biggest honeypots are the large web shops where all of that personal and banking and financial information is held. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities in there.
Yeah, and I also think that if you look at web shops, the fact that they can just trust the data that's being submitted, so that they can trust the address to be valid, and that they can trust, for instance, the bank account to be belonging to the person that's actually doing the purchase, helps tremendously. Because, for instance, if you look at the largest web shops in the Netherlands, they have to do a lot of fraud checks as well, for instance. So they can do savings there, but also for the actual consumer, the fact that you have a wallet app, and that whenever you need to submit some data, and the fact, for instance, that your local government has issued this credential that you live on this address, for instance, your app just pops up. Look, they want to have your address information. Do you want to share it with them? And that's just an okay, instead of you manually filling out these forms, for instance, on the internet. And we really believe that this technology will bring that identity layer also to the internet, for instance. And that's where you definitely will see, of course, a lot of business to consumer as well.
Yeah, that triggered me for the other project we're doing together with LTO, is on the United Nations Go Land Registry project. Maybe you want to introduce that briefly. I don't know, but then I can give you the angle on the verifiable credentials there.
Yeah, sure. So in 2019, we were in New York pitching to United Nations for a request for proposal to build a land registration system for Afghanistan. Basically, they were in need of a new system where basically all the pieces of land were divided again amongst the people who lived there, and people who had already a claim on a building or a piece of land, by having like a form of a document, would be able to prove that to the local authorities, and then they would also be entered into the system. So we've built this system together with the United Nations. It took like 1.5 years to build, and it's rolled out now in Kabul and beyond, in the rest of the provinces of Afghanistan. They're issuing 2.8 million parcels of land in the next year. So yeah, that's pretty big for a country to basically grab such a new technology base and saying, hey, if the next warlord jumps in, we want to be able to replay what has happened. We want to be able to have, with people having physical documents or PDFs in their emails or on their phones, that we're able to track whether this was a correct PDF or whether this actually has been issued by a local government. And with blockchain technology, this is possible. So it doesn't matter how many warlords barge into Afghanistan when the United States leaves. It is actually going to be something solid in the next decades. And we're really proud of this project, doing this with the UN and now handing this over to the local government. But something which is really interesting came across while building this project is basically how we're going to verify the people and the owners and the transfers and who is it transferring to. And that's where DIDs and VCs are perfectly capable of.
Yeah, because we are, of course, all the time talking about the verifiable credential that was validated by my bank or by my government or by my trusted party, centralized trusted party that we have in these highly organized countries we currently live in. But for instance, we're also talking in other, for the same project with other countries in the Middle East, but also in Africa, and one of the largest countries there is looking at this system, and they have not a formalized system. They have like informal settlements where people have been living for centuries, but certainly for decades, owning a house or owning a plot of land, which is nowhere registered. So how do you know, how can someone issue a credential, a claim that this is actually their piece of land? They can't, because there's no such system. But if the whole village says, okay, but this guy or this family has been living here for decades, and yes, this is their piece of land, then you can create a web of trust of parties that are not centralized or have their trust nationally, but because everybody, their mullah or pastor or their nephew, their neighbor, everybody basically provides authenticity to that claim, you basically get a whole network of trusts that also carry the same weight or even more weight of what is actually the situation, and that this person does own the land and has been owning this land for quite a number of years. So it's not only that the technology will work in our Western well-organized countries, or Eastern well-organized countries, but basically anywhere in the world. The same, there's also,
Yeah, I mean, even it's like if there is some sort of disruption in that country for a period of time, but then that disruption potentially ends. Like, sure, during that disruption, it might be kind of all over the place, but once the disruption is over, everyone can now point to this thing and say, hey, this is kind of how it was set up for this period of time and who did what. Like, this is my card to say, let's go back to that, and it's verified. It's not just, because people are going to be kind of potentially displaced. And this is all amazing, like in Africa and kind of the growing, populations and people there. But I want to ask one hard question, and then I want to kind of go back to like government versus business, because it seems like it's like which reputation is worse, that like they need to have this kind of trustlessness, piece of data. But a lot of the companies, it's like the data and the PII that they have, like email addresses and phone numbers and all of these things, it's part of, the way that they market to people and the way that they get to people and, grow their businesses. And it's a very vital piece of a lot of these businesses. Are they going to give this stuff up, or is it going to take the consumer pushing so hard on them where they say, I have to give this stuff up? And how do they, have you gone into a company yet that's just very PII heavy, that uses it and has like a great, data lake for marketing, and their user acquisition costs really low, and this is something that they're still looking at, or does it seem to be other reasons or other kind of companies that are looking at it?
Well, I've not been into these company situations, but I've heard about it. And probably the most well-known example is the recent changes from Apple in their new iOS, that you have to confirm whether or not you want to share and have the other apps follow you around. And you have to have the permission. And I just heard, I haven't read it, I haven't verified it, but I heard that in the first statistics show that 69% of the people actually say, I don't want to be followed. And that doesn't hurt Apple because their business model is different. But we all heard that it hurts Facebook. So there will be companies that have absolutely a business model where they will want this information, and the more the better. But there will be also companies that will have a different business model and rather not have that information, or don't need it at least. I think there will be both camps, and there will be both type of companies that will be happy to give it up.
Yeah, and I think what also helps is typically the average user on the internet isn't so much concerned about privacy, but if you do ask them, they are very concerned about it. But just in the technical sense, they typically don't know how to deal with it, and they use the same password all over the place. But I firmly believe with the recent hacks that you have been seeing with large companies where data has been stolen, and these big databases with user information, passwords and stuff like that has been stolen, that we will see a shift also towards more privacy preserving technology, which of course verifiable credentials and the IDs are very much, because they can remove basically all the passwords that people are using by using so-called public and private keys, which means that for every interaction you do with a party, you can have your own DID, your own key pair basically, and you know that you're communicating with the other party without really even needing passwords, for instance. And that also means that you cannot lose your passwords, for instance, and or reuse your passwords. And I think, indeed, like was already mentioned, in the Netherlands, we had a big breach with COVID-19 information being sold on the internet. It's stuff like that that happens every single day and even seems to increase. And I do believe that you will see companies basically wanting to move in towards a more decentralized solution, and a solution where data is stored more at the user level, and them not having to worry about GDPR and stuff like that. But I also believe that there will be a tipping point where actual users will just basically sort of demand having safer technology available.
Yeah, I also believe that, everybody knows that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, right? Yeah. So most people are not aware of that. So, but if you get the pop-up in your face, like, hey, we're tracking you and you're sharing your data with this application, then you're aware, like, oh, okay, do you need to track me? Oh, yeah, okay, obviously, because it's a free app. And then you can either say, okay, or you say no. But if you say no, well, the businesses will start converting their business model in something to say, hey, okay, you don't want to be tracked, then you need to pay for the application, which makes sense, right? So you will see the first movers of DIDs and VCs are the companies that are not making money from the data they track or have from their users. This is going to be the first adapters. And then businesses are going to shift their business models when they are starting to lose customers based on the, no, I don't want to be followed, or no, don't want to share my private data with you anymore. So I think the Facebooks and the Instagrams of this world will start changing their business model rapidly if this goes on.
Yeah. And for instance, also to conclude this question, at least from my side, is that you have parties like IBM and, for instance, also Microsoft heavily involved in this technology. So it's not just innovators like us, which are relatively small companies working across the globe in standardization. Okay, a really big company. No, we're not. But parties like IBM and Microsoft are also heavily involved in this technology. And then you have the W3C, which is the Internet Standards Organization, which is also which has accepted and made it into a full specification. And the last bits and pieces of that are currently in the review phase as well. So I really do believe that this will be seen by a lot of users without them knowing, actually, in the future, but will be integrated into a lot of business solutions as well. Absolutely.
Oh, one more cool thing. Oh. Last cool thing. So, like, there are a lot of people listening probably also that are like, okay, the outside world, businesses, what I'm in the crypto space, and everything that happens there is already anonymous, and we don't share any private data except for the exchanges if we don't want to go fiat back to the real world, which nobody wants. But regulation is coming. Like, we have been farming our asses off to get pancakes with syrup on it or sushi with nigiris on it. But that party is going to change rapidly, guys. So for everybody who's listening, like, the DeFi space will need to be changing with KYC and AML procedures, with verifiable credentials and DIDs, because otherwise the party is going to be stopped. And this is the regulation which is already in the making by the US, but also by the European government as well. The EU is saying, okay, if you're participating in the pool, you need to be able to tell who you are. So in order to do this, you don't want to give your passport to a protocol like MakerDAO or whatever. You want to be able to do that instantly. You want to put your liquidity inside of the pool to be used for automated market making. But in order to do so, you must be able to say, hey, yes, I was verified by this exchange in order to participate in the pool. So that we're already making a link between your KYC, which you have done on the platform. Let's say you done it on Coinbase. You're verified at intermediate level. So you're able to do 10 BTC of transfers on a day on Coinbase itself. Then you would also be then it would be only possible to participate in a pool of 10 BTC maximum on that day, you know. So that will be the restrictions which we will see in the future. That's my educated guess, and that's where we also changing our protocol in order to have this regulation already been implemented, so that we are basically saving the DeFi space if we want to continue this party.
Yeah.
There's actually, I mean, there's quite a few questions, but there's actually a lot of chatter in the chat around the land ownership topic. You know, and how does it work? People saying, I want to reclaim my land from my ancestors, and I guess, you know, aside from the technology, how will this work?
Yeah, so how does it work? Well, look it up in the GitHub of LTO. It will be open soon, so you can play around with it. But how does it work? It consists of about 7 or 8 modules. So you have a survey module where they basically map out the entire country in Google Maps with every plot there is, with every piece of building there currently already is. And they're reissuing this to the people who claim it. And the claims that could be even verified by a local medicine man that says, yeah, I lived in the village for the last 20 years before the war started, and this was indeed the family which was already there. And this claim is supported by 10 others. Then they are going to issue the certificate, right? And then you have a dispute system where people have, where they say, hey, no, this claim which you've done on this piece of land where Mr. X now has this occupancy certificate of, it's actually mine. I can prove this. Look at the photos that were taken with my family 20 years ago here in this piece of land and in this building. So that's when you have the dispute module in the land registration system. You have the beneficial owner module where you can see who owns what and what his father was and the name of that. So basically all the people involved in this land registration system. So then you have the verification of the data, which is basically LTO Network, the blockchain part underneath it. But the biggest part of it's a centralized system with all types of user interface modules where they'll be able to issue land, transfer land, issue invoices to be paid for taxes and registration fees, local municipalities that are able to approve certain claims and issue certain pieces of land and approve the transfers. So it's basically your entire land title system, but we have LTO Network as a basically digital fingerprint with immutability layer underneath it to be able to safeguard the fact that if some new ISIS jumps in to overthrow the current regime, then we're able to replay everything that happened, and we don't need to rely on the claims of the medicine man 20 years ago, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and the blockchain involvement is basically on 2 points. First of all, what Rick mentions, the anchoring of the information, so that you have its time-stamped and you can later on verify that the information is still correct and has not been tampered with. The other part is that the landowners often need to provide this information to other stakeholders. Like they want to build a house, they need a mortgage, or they want to have credit or other information that they want to do it. They have to provide information to other stakeholders. And that's again where the verifiable credentials come in again, because basically the deed of ownership or the certificate of occupancy or these kind of informations, you can basically also put in a data file, a verifiable credential. And that is then again signed by the land registry department. And then they can forward that to the bank or the financial institution or by anyone else that needs that information, who can then immediately verify that this is a valid claim, that the data in the credential is correct and can be used to at least see if they are entitled to a loan or whatever they want to do with it. So that's the second part of the blockchain that is being used in the land registry system.
Yeah, so I think that that's important. Also, if you consider blockchain in general, because what is it? It's a system where the same data is copied and exists in lots of places. Every node is the same copy of the data, and then there's consensus about that information. So here it's the same. You have these credentials, and they exist at the municipality, at the central government, at the landowner. They all have a copy of that data, and there's consensus that this data is valid and is true. So, and I think the interesting part in this is that you don't need a central network where all the data is kept and exists over hundreds of nodes, but you've got the stakeholders involved that are responsible for holding their own copy of that data. And even if all the other copies get destroyed, they can still prove, okay, the copy that I have is valid and should be trusted.
Yeah, it's almost like friend and I were on a hike the other day. We realized we're like, it's just a big truth machine, right? It's like it's this truth machine that no matter what you put into it, you can prove it. And I like that you guys, what you're doing over there, because it's like when you start kind of from scratch a little bit, it's the jump in innovation that you can make is much further, right? Like hearing you talk about, like land deeds, hearing you talk about, maybe like people paying taxes on that, and all of it being taken care of kind of by a trustless source, and creating this kind of like streamlined process. It's like, being able to purchase property there, could look very different and much faster than a place like here in the US in the future, right? You could sell a house in a day. You can sell a house in 5 days, or land in a day, versus taking 30 days and loans and how much, what's your credit score and all these crazy things. It's like, it takes a lot of time to disrupt those technologies and those businesses here. But in places that are kind of starting new, it's a great place for you to kind of go and kind of create a really amazing proof of concept.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be releasing a white paper end of the week with 25 use cases of DIDs and verifiable credentials, which we will share with the audience so that everybody can take a glimpse on what it might mean for them or their organization. Maybe they can share it with their bosses or people having their own companies wanting to implement this stuff, because it's pretty exciting and it's going to change everything we know today and how we're doing about how we handle our personal data in interactions on the internet.
Yeah, and let them bring the next 25 cases to us that they think of themselves to inspire us as well. I mean, there's a big pool of smart people out there who can certainly come up with the next 25 cool things.
On that front, we've got LTO Moonbase Node asking, are there any other use cases that your team sees within the government? Any new sectors they're trying to enter?
Yeah, I think that's yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. Maybe you can answer it.
Yeah, we have another government Ministry of Justice where there are special investigators who basically have special tasks that they have to perform, maybe checking environmental offenses or other things, and they have to identify themselves to the public. Everybody can put on a yellow shirt or a nice hat and to say that they are a special investigator, but how do you prove that you are a special investigator? Well, you carry these identity cards with you, which have your private information on there as well. So you, first of all, they can be lost and someone else can find them. They can be tampered with. A person can be fired for whatever kind of reason, but still hold on to his card that he lost. And then you basically cannot be sure that they are a special investigator. So again, by using these verifiable credentials and digital identities, we issue a digital identity to an investigator, and then he can prove by just showing a QR code with minimum information that can be checked that they are in fact that they are a special investigator. So that is being done with the Ministry of Justice. The nice thing also is if they are losing their phone or losing whatever, or they are fired, or they basically get assigned to another type of job, that they can automatically online be revoked or changed So you don't have to issue a whole new pass and go to a whole that person, but it can be suspended for a week or changed within a minute to cover another task. So that's another project we're doing.
Yeah, and we're also looking, for instance, with them about certificates of good conduct. So if you are onboarded at a company, for instance, or at a sports club doing voluntary work, for instance, you typically have to provide a certificate of good conduct, which basically means that you haven't been in trouble with the law. And we are really looking at, and that's still early stages, looking with them to basically have these certificates of good conduct basically digitized using verifiable credential technology, because right now it's sort of like a PDF or a document you get sent home, which is rather easy to tamper with. This technology would basically prevent from tampering, and would also mean that if you do get in contact, for instance, with Justice in the meantime, Justice would be able to revoke that credential, for instance, while in the current implementation, you can still go to somebody else and just have your certificate of good conduct because it was issued a few weeks ago, for instance.
Yeah, and only in the Netherlands they're being issued 1.2 million certificates of conduct per year. So that's just for the Netherlands. So.
Yeah, if you're shifting a job, you need one.
Yep.
If you want to go work in the States, you need one. If you want to apply for a visa, you need one. It's like one of the documents you get like once every like year at least.
Yeah.
If you're like more like traveling, working person.
Living.
Yeah.
Let's throw you guys a lead here. Mr. Lappin TV, as a business owner, is interested in using LTO for authentication. I have so many ideas how we could enhance the services we offer. How can someone get started with LTO?
Well, let's first reach out via Telegram. I think that's the simplest thing to do. Hit me up, please, at Rick Schmitz to contact me, and then we'll dive into it. Otherwise, inquiry via the website ltonetwork.com, also possible, whatever you seem to like. And then let's take it from there, because every use case has its specifics. Likely that I'm going to involve one of these guys to be able to tailor the business case to your needs. And then let's see what can happen. Hopefully you bring something cool.
Yeah. And if there are developers that want to get started, there's documentation. You can start and run a node and just play around with things. There are a number of tutorials. So if you're a developer that wants to say, okay, what can I do with it? How can I use it? Just go install Docker and play around.
Awesome. Well, guys, I know we're coming up on time a little bit. John, if you didn't have anything else, I just wanted to ask, why is, every time I talk to folks that are in Amsterdam, it's like they're about some of the nicest people like I feel like I've talked to, very inviting. And whenever I'm there, even if you're traveling alone, it's like some of the nicest people. Why is everyone so nice there?
It helps that we have beer over here, I guess.
I was gonna say, maybe it's because I'm always talking to you guys when it's nighttime over there and you're already starting to drink a couple of beers.
Yeah, I think that the reason is that we invented Heineken. I think that's the reason why we are having such a good time. And
you guys with your beer, there's other good things.
Yeah, but guys, you're welcome whenever you're here. Join here for a beer in the office. Hope to see you soon. Hope the States is allowed to fly here soon. And let's keep on going with the conversation and the things we do together.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for being a part of this, and just let everyone know, like, where do they find you guys? What's the easiest way? Follow on Twitter, go to the website. How do you want them to follow you?
Yeah, so at the LTO Network for our Twitter, LTO Network for the Telegram, and for the website, LTOnetwork.com. Those are the ones to have a look at. You'll find everything on the website also. Just if you're a developer, you go to the documentation, the GitHub and stuff like that. And the links to the Telegram and stuff like that is also there.
Yeah, and for Sphereon, it's at Sphereon or Sphereon.com. So we'll continue to work together.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put that stuff in the show notes so everyone knows where to find you guys. And yeah, we'll have to do this again. This is fun. We got it seems like there's even a lot more questions. So we'll make sure we have you guys back, and we'll chat with y'all backstage here. Thank you everyone for listening and being a part of it. And everyone have a fantastic rest of your week.